business started originally as a grocer's shop. My great-grandparents were great-grandfather, sorry, was one of 13 children, who was the son of a farmer, and decided that farming wasn't the way to go, wanted to open up a shop, chose drapery and grocery as his challenge, and opened up in 1889 in Cross Hills. And from there, he decided, along with his children, ultimately his daughter, actually, a lady called Ida Whitaker, decided that grocery and drapery wasn't the way forward. After about 11 or 12 years of trying to make a living, she was a very talented confectioner, and she went and learnt the craft of baking and confectionery in the seaside town of Morecambe, and overnight came back and persuaded her parents to change the shop into a bakery and confectionery shop. So that was the first step. We went from Cross Hills to Keighley and Otley, opening up a shop, having various successes. But Ida Whitaker was extremely talented, and whether she could turn her hand to art, to pottery, painting, confectionery, and decided then to really develop outside catering as well as from the shop. But after about till 1926, the family decided to shut down Cross Hills, Keighley, Otley, and moved to Skipton. The family moved the house, opened up a shop in Skipton, and then subsequently moved to this site where we are now, and started again with a bakery, building a bakery in the garden to the house that they bought. And that would be in the early 30s, before the war. So right up until the war, we had a shop in the High Street in Skipton which had a restaurant above it, a cafe, and one shop. And then this site, we lived on this site and had a bakery here. And we continued that way right through till the end of the war, through the 50s, literally as one outlet. And it was my father in the late 50s that decided that, having looked at what was happening, he'd be a young man of about 26 years old, that baking in his mind was not the way to go forward. In terms of the development of the business from the 1960s, once my father decided that baking wasn't the way to go, he recognised that we had one person who was making chocolate. So from 1889 through till 1961, when the company became a limited company, all those 70 odd years, it was just one person making chocolates and 20 people in the bakery. But he saw the advent of the supermarket developments and thought the way forward was not in baking, but let's experiment with chocolate. And that was the first real big change in the business, because we'd gone on for all those years before without real direction. And he was young enough, he'd actually learned to be a baker himself and had done enough early starts to realise that probably he wanted to be in the chocolate business. And it was through that decision and then extended the bakery in the garden of the house to call it a chocolate factory without any extra sales, without any extra machinery. But he was, young enough and naive enough and hard-working enough to think, rather, we'll do it this way. And the main change next was actually not going through the shops anymore, but using hotels and restaurants as our method of sales outlets. So literally we started knocking on the doors of hotels and restaurants, selling one product that was made in the company's range of products at that time that turned out to be ultimately successful. Whitakers has developed from a local, well-known branded company based in Skipton that ultimately has had the name carried throughout the country, which you could do with chocolate more than baking, which is why we went down that road. And I think in the early days of development in the 60s and the 70s, Whitakers was a brand that it stood for quality and variety and excellence in terms of everything that it did. And the fact that it was a local delicacy, we had great support locally, but we had to move beyond that. Today, 90% of what we produce is actually not in the Whitaker name. So we haven't grown the Whitaker name because we found that in the markets that we chose to develop, that there was a lot of competition there. And for us to develop a brand against the likes of After Eights, Elizabeth Shaw's, those sort of people, some of whom we now manufacture for, that it would be very expensive and time consuming, and we decided to go the other route. The business today is now down to about 4 core products. So I use the analogy that probably 30 years ago, 20 years ago, we used to make, say, 100 products into 5 boxes. Now we'll make 4 or 5 products in 100 and whatever number of boxes, because we've become so specialized in the type of products that we do. And we have to, as any manufacturer does. Because you can only go, once you decide that you need to invest in the machinery, you're stuck with it. So our policy has been to invest in the best machinery. Some of it is quite old now, but it's doing the job that we want it to do. In terms of the future, we're bringing out developments of core products, sort of new takes on existing products, new ideas to actually label and wrap the products. And the future really is exciting in terms of where we can expand overseas particularly, and the things that we can do. Like, we expect within the next year or so to be able to take a photograph, or someone to take a photograph, send it to us, and within 48 hours have as few as 1,000 chocolates with that image anywhere sent out around the world. So we've become very specialised in the 4 or 5 products that we do. And to be honest, we're not going to make it 6 products or 7. We want to develop what we've already done to a degree that our potential competitors would look at what we're doing and thinking, well, we've got to do 100 years development beforehand before we can even get to that particular new ideas that Whitakers have got. David Richmond and actually my relations also with Andrew Mitchell on the tax side. And over the last few years, as we've grown and as the family's got bigger, we've considered all options for the business, whether it's company share buy backs, or whether it's disposal or management buyouts. We've had to consider a lot and needed expert advice to actually, to go through those options. And David and Andrew have come up with some very interesting and unusual ideas, things that we're benefiting from, giving us all the information that we need to be able to make informed choices, really, as to the best way forward. And we hope over the next year or two, as the 5th generation is entering the business, that we all understand what the options are. And as I said, David and Andrew have really helped us understand those.